It didn't work. Oh, well, I see a little ray out there. Now, if you need help turning it, I can help you after church. We can turn it there, you know. Now, that being said, I saw a really interesting clock this week. It looks like a cylinder, like this here. And when you look at it on the side, it's got all kinds of little holes, little rectangle holes in it. And when the sun shines through, it gives you the time of day. But again, you have to set it in the right place. Of course, that clock is always going to be right someplace in the world. Just not here. Okay, we're looking at 1 Kings chapter 12. 1 Kings chapter 12. And the theme of our lesson this morning is the messages of the media. The messages of the media. And now this is true regardless of what the environment is. In other words, if you're at school and something happens, there are people that will. There are some people that know what happened, okay, and then other people, they'll just make it up, right? And they fill in the blanks, okay? And so the same way so we're looking at the theme, the media. In the last couple weeks, you know that everything that you have heard on the news, on the media, is not exactly true. You know that, right? It was reported by several major outlets that Israel bombed a hospital. Okay, they blew up a hospital, and come to find out, they didn't have anything to do with it. It was Hamas, and they fired a rocket at Israel, and they were in the parking lot of the hospital, and the rocket misfired, and the rocket went into the hospital. Okay, and so this week you may have heard that Israel bombed a refugee camp. Okay, and that's not accurate. Hamas is hiding in the refugee camp. Okay, so what we're looking at this morning is the messages of the media. Okay, 1 Kings chapter 12. Everyone in society is trying to give their opinion. Doesn't matter what it is, right? Right? I mean, I'm going to sit here this morning and I'm going to tell you that the Patriots are going to win the Super Bowl this year. The Dolphins are going to lose today. That's my opinion. They're already behind 14-0. Yeah, it's 4 minutes into the game. Both kickoffs, they got run back for touchdowns. No. That's my opinion. We live in a 24/7 news cycle. I mean, if you can't sleep tonight, and at 2 o'clock this morning, you get up and you turn on your TV, you know there's going to be some talking head, right? There's going to be somebody talking. It goes 24/7. It doesn't stop. Okay? And there's a lot of information floating around. How many of you remember when the former president, President Trump, he used to say there was fake news? Okay? Now, the reason he said it was fake news turned out to be because it was fake news. Okay? He was not in collusion with the Russians. That was fake news. And we know that today And I find it, ironic that the people that put that out there are the people that was accusing him of collusion, and they made the story up, and nothing has happened to them at all. Okay? So there is a lot of information, and there are a lot of opinions that are floating around. That information runs the mill from true to false. There may be a measure of truth in something, and there may not be. Okay. Not every piece of advice should be heeded. Okay. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. The central truth of our lesson today is carefully heed to God's voice. Okay. We need to pay attention to the Lord. What does the Lord say about a situation? So that we need to pay attention to the Lord. Okay, question number 2. We're going to look at Solomon's son, Rehoboam, in this context. Now, as we're going through this lesson, I might get Rehoboam mixed up with Jeroboam. Okay, I have been known to do that before, because they're in the same story. Okay, it's like talking about Elijah and Elisha, and sometimes I have the Ja and the Sha mixed up. I preached one time to the deaf church, and I was preaching about Elijah and Elisha in the same story, and the poor person that was translating for me, because I would say Elisha, and so they were, so I always remember it, that Rehoboam is Solomon's son because R is close to S. J is further away, and he's not related. Okay, so that's how I keep it in my head. Now, Rehoboam was in a complicated situation. In 1 Kings chapter 12, he became the 4th king of Israel. Okay? The first king was Saul. The second king was David. The third king was Solomon. And now Solomon has passed away, and Rehoboam has been anointed king. Now, his father was the wisest man on the earth, and he's gone. So he can't lean on his father's wisdom. If his father was there, he could have said, "Dad, what should I do?" Okay? But his dad's not there, so he can't do that. So Rehoboam turned to 2 groups of people in this story. He turned to his peers, and he turned to his mentors. His peers are the ones that are in the same age bracket, okay? His mentors were his father's advisors. And he found out, this is jumping all the way to the end of the lesson, okay? He found out that not all advice was good. Sometimes you'll get bad advice, and it maybe it's going to be expensive, okay? Maybe you'll get good advice, and you'll learn something, okay? But not all advice is good. Question number 3. Take your time. Take your time. When you're faced with a decision to make, take your time. Salesmen, they want to kind of get you like this, right? And they want you to make an impulse buy, all right? So don't rush. Take your time, do it right. Don't rush in where angels fear to tread. Okay. So take your time. It's easy to be confused by so-called experts. We're probably going to say this again, but in the media, there are all kinds of experts, right? Every news hour, whatever that person is, they're the expert. Sandy?
Somebody asked about being an expert, and this person in the teacher said, you're an expert when you get paid for what you do.
Well, how many of you remember the O.J. Simpson trial? And they called in experts, right? And the experts said yes, and the experts said no. So you flip a coin. All right. Some people will seek to give out, they'll seek you out to give their opinion. Okay? I'm going to pick on Robert. Robert, they're just going to lose today. I'm seeking you out to give you my opinion, okay? There are people that they think you're going to do something, they hear you're going to do something, and they will come and give you that kind of advice, right? You didn't ask for their advice. Maybe you didn't want their advice. Robert says, Pastor, go away. Okay. All right. So sometimes people will do that. Sometimes the closer they are to you, okay, they may tell you that. RJ may tell you that, Robert, that they're going to lose. But he might be pulling your leg, too. He's your son, okay? Your mother might tell you that, okay? George might tell you that, okay? But every one of them have a different, okay. All right. So Rehoboam asked for 3 days to consider the advice that he's being given at this moment. Give me 3 days to think about this. It's always good to pause and give time to process. Okay, you have to think. And for me, it's harder to think when someone is okay. That's harder. So we have to, and some advice will take time to evaluate it. So Jeroboam and much of Israel asked Rehoboam to lighten their load. Okay, they came to him and they said, look, the building of the temple extracted a heavy tax on the nation. It took 7 years to build the temple. And it took a lot of money to build the temple because the temple, inside the temple, was overlaid with gold. Imagine what it must have looked like inside the temple, and to light a candle with all of the walls overlaid with gold. It just must have been beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. Then it was 7 years to build the temple, and then it was 13 years to build Solomon's palace. And then after he built the palace, he built the hall of the forest of Lebanon, and then he built the hall of judgment, and then he built Pharaoh's daughter another huge palace. Okay, so construction going on for a long, long time, decades. And again, it was a heavy tax on the people. And so Jeroboam and them said, lighten the tax, and we will gladly follow you. Okay. Now, Ahijah the prophet had prophesied the kingdom being divided. We talked about this last spring. Jeroboam was coming into the city, met Ahijah. Ahijah had a new robe. He tore the robe into 12 pieces. He told Jeroboam to take 10, and he kept 2. And he said, this is what the Lord says. He's going to give you 10 tribes. You're going to be a king. So when Solomon died, Jeroboam returned from exile in Egypt, because when Solomon heard about the prophecy, he was in the market square when Ahijah tore up the garment, and then he gave 10 pieces to Jeroboam, and everybody, it was on the 6 o'clock news, it was on the internet, everybody knew about it, okay? And so Jeroboam's life wasn't worth beans, because Solomon was trying to kill him. So Jeroboam fled to Egypt. Now that Solomon has died, he came back. So Jeroboam did not come back and say, I'm going to be king. He didn't come and say to the 10 tribes, he wasn't blowing his own horn. He was given Rehoboam an opportunity to do the right thing. And he wasn't usurping authority at this moment. Now, we should seek wise counsel. Okay? If you have a huge decision in front of you to make, it's always good to get another set of eyes. Okay? I'm thinking about doing this. Always good. They might give you some important, good advice. So it's always good to seek wise counsel. The consequences of Rehoboam's response extended beyond himself. This wasn't a matter of buying a new chariot. This wasn't that he was going to buy a racehorse. This was a matter of the kingdom. This was really, really huge. And it is not admitting ignorance to ask for time to evaluate. Now sometimes people, when they want you to make a decision quickly, when they want you to when people are wanting you to make a quick decision, that probably ought to be a huge red flag to back up and wait, because it's probably not in your favor. It's probably not good for you. And so it's always good to ask for a little time. Now, Rehoboam asked his father's advisors for their advice. The men, those advisors were time-tested and proven. Those advisors had spent time with Solomon. Don't you think that they learned a few things? In 40 years of being with Solomon, being the wisest man on the earth, don't you think they learned a few things? Yeah, okay. They knew some stuff. They were good advisors. They had worked alongside Solomon and had learned. So that was a good thing to ask them. Now, question number 6. This is Solomon's advisor's advice. They advised him to show humility, the humility that his father had. Okay? Show humility. They wanted him to gain the trust of the people. He just newly appointed king. They didn't know what he was going to do, how he was going to do it. They didn't know his temperament. So gain the trust of the people. It would have been wise for him to follow their advice. Now, hindsight is always 20/20, right? Hindsight's 20/20. Looking back at a situation, I can tell you Patriots should have beat the Dolphins last week. But that's only because I've watched the game, and they should have prepared better. When you're looking back at it, you don't have the opportunity to second guess. You don't. Okay? You think they're going this way, and they really went that way. Okay. Would have been wise, but he didn't. Question 7. The media is a self-proclaimed expert on every subject. They freely dispense their opinion, whether you ask for it or not. And what I find amusing is there are people that on one side, on both sides of an argument, okay? On one side, they will say, this is, and let's just pick names for a second. The Democrats will say, that's a terrible thing to do. The Republicans are never going to survive if they do that. This is the worst thing that they can do, and they will never survive. Now, and then, the Republicans will say the same thing. The Democrats will never survive if they do that. Well, you know that neither party has the best interests of the other party in mind. You know that, right? Doesn't matter what the party. It can be the footloose and fancy-free party. I just made that party up. Okay? Seldom today is it just a reporting of the news. When George Bush Jr. was running for president, you remember, well, maybe you don't remember, there was a story reported on CBS News about him getting drunk and had an OUI, and that his father got him off from it, and all this stuff, and that he was a draft evader, that his father got him deferred, and now the anchor for the CBS News, they reported it as if it was the news. They reported it. They reported it as if it was true. Come to find out, it wasn't true. And then, on top of that, not only did they find that it wasn't true, they discovered that when the anchor was reporting it, he knew it was a false story. Okay? Reporting the news. Today, when news is when they're reading it to you, a lot of it is their opinion about the news. Okay? So we have to be very careful when we're listening even to the news. Now, they fill the airspace with chatter. Take the reports with a grain of salt. And sometimes their reports can flame people to action. Every one of us are responsible for your own actions. Okay? Now, I didn't hear this week. I meant to look it up, and I didn't. I've been kind of busy the last couple days. In case you didn't know it, the Texas Rangers won the World Series. Okay? I didn't hear if, let's see, where are the Texas Rangers? What city? Are they, I don't know what city they're in. Arlington? Okay. Now, did they burn Arlington down with riots afterwards this week? I haven't heard any news. Now, I have heard in some cases where, the Chicago Bulls, they won the NBA championship, and then there were riots and they burned cars, and you heard that, right? Why are they doing that? Sometimes people can the news can report something that's not true, and then people will do something as a response to that. So you have to be very careful. Now, Rehoboam's friends offered their advice. You have Solomon's advisors. They gave their advice. Be humble, lessen the tax load, and get the people's trust. They'll follow you. They, on the other hand, advised him to be more strict than his father. They advised him to raise the taxes. They advised him to be meaner, if you want to use that, okay? To rule with a rod of iron, to show his muscle, to show his strength. Now, this was the direction that Rehoboam was leaning in anyway. He was kind of leaning that direction. We need to be careful in taking advice only from those who agree with us. Sometimes we only want people to reinforce our position, and we're not open to hear truth. People can be guided by fame or ratings or advancement. They can have their eyes on all kinds of different things, and they're not looking at what is the very best for a situation. Now, we may feel we have to make a hasty decision, and this goes to the previous question of taking our time. Taking time. Now, Rehoboam is the one that set the 3-day deadline. Maybe he should have come back after 3 days and said, "Can I have 3 more days?" Okay? It's always okay to ask for more time, to think something through longer. Now, accepting the path, question number 9. Turn the page. Accepting the wrong advice led Rehoboam down a wrong path. Think about it as directions to some place. Okay, we're going to go to the mall, but we want to get there quickly. We're going to take the turnpike. Okay, are you with me? We're going to shoot right up here, Washington Avenue, and we're going to go up to exit 53. Okay, and we're going to get on the turnpike. As we get onto the turnpike, we're going to take a right-hand turn, and we're going to drive as fast as we can to get to the mall. We're going to take that right-hand turn when we get onto the turnpike. Are you with me? No, I'm going north on the turnpike. The main mall is south, okay? But I want to go to the main mall. I've got money to burn. I really want to go, you know. But you're going in the wrong direction. And until you get off, turn around, and head south, you're never going to get there. Well, is it John McDonald, the main comedian? He said, well, your tires aren't going to make it. It's 25,000 miles to go around the earth. You're not going to make it. So he accepted the wrong advice, and that went definitely the wrong way. They wanted to inflict heavier burdens on the people. I'm sure they were thinking that their pockets were going to get lined along the way. Now, that's a popular method of some people today. They are going to show strength. They're going to show decision. They're not going to waffle. They're not going to show weakness. Okay? Now I get it when we're talking about sports. Okay? The Notre Dame I think when Newt Rockne was playing there, Notre Dame one time, they beat University of South California. This was 60 years ago. They beat them. And the way that they beat them was the coach went all over the city, and he found the biggest people, biggest guys that he could. I mean, these guys were 6'5", 6'8". They didn't play football. But what he did was he brought them to the game, and he put them in uniform along his sideline. So when the University of South Carolina, when they came and they looked across the field, what they saw were these huge football players. Those guys never went in the game. They just stood on the sideline, and USC lost the game. The coach kept saying, "Don't look at the guys. Don't look at them. Don't." But they kept their eyes. They kept their eyes on those guys on the field, on the side of the field, and they lost the game. Sometimes people think they have to be stronger, crueler. No. Now, some would cancel you out or shame you instead of respecting a different opinion. I don't know if you've encountered that in talking with people today. You talk to them, and instead of them, it used to be, okay, let's agree to disagree. But today, in the public square, it's not like that. The cancel culture has sprung up for social justice, or the appearance of social justice. Sometimes these things come up. They come up with things that can't speak exactly for themselves. You've probably heard them say before, well, we're doing it for the environment. You heard that, right? We're doing it for the environment. We're doing it for clean water. We're doing it for the children. You've heard all of those things. Well, who wants a polluted environment? Nobody. Who wants dirty air? Nobody. Who wants to hurt children? Nobody. So, it's a straw man argument. However, the response is inappropriate. The media should not be allowed to become the judge, jury, and executioner. Today, the climate has changed, and in many cases, you're guilty. You have to prove your innocence. You have to prove you didn't do something. And, that's just opposite of what our judicial system is based upon. Okay, question number 10, verses 12 to 15. Public display of stupidity. There's no cure for stupidity, right? People, sometimes they do stupid stuff. Some media focus on the failings of people. That if that, I'll say this candidate. Do you know that when that candidate was in kindergarten, one time they took the little girl that sat next to them, they took their dessert. They took her dessert. They ate her dessert in kindergarten. Can you believe it? This man does not deserve to live. We ought to take him out and lynch him right now. They do not, the opportunity or the possibility of repentance. Every one of us here, we thank the Lord that we can repent of our sin, right? I once was lost, but now I'm found. I once was blind, but now I see. And sometimes the news gets it wrong. They hear something and they report it as true, and it's not true. The accusation will be on the front page, right? You open the paper, on the front page in letters this big. And it's not true. And then, of course, you know, they're really quick to find out if something was true or not. And then when they discover that they were wrong, in a couple days when they find out that they were wrong, they print in the paper that they were wrong, and they put it on the middle of the paper in print that you have to use a magnifying glass to see. Sorry, we were wrong. Or sometimes they don't even say that, sorry, we were wrong. You know, they might say the answer was 4, and then they bury it, and they say, oh, the answer was 7. Question number 11. Rehoboam spoke harshly to the people. He assembled them back, brought them together in 3 days. He thought taking this approach would show them who was boss. Okay? He paid no attention to the people. This alienated 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel. Well, this is bad. This is really bad. Now, decisions can be pivotal, changing the course of history. It did here. This changed Israel's history forever. Israel was never the same after this. Okay. He may have been king, but his disrespect cost him dearly. There are some things that we can't live long enough to outlive that bad publicity. Okay. Years ago, when I was working, I was driving truck for a company, and I delivered some parts to national distributors down here. They were on, I don't know where they are now, they were on Canco Road. They have a great big warehouse. And so I delivered some parts for one of their trucks. And I was in where they go in and they load and everything. And up on the wall, when you were driving out of the building, in great big letters, they must have been about this big, and it said, drivers, check the stale date of every case of beer, because that's what they distribute beer. It says, because all the advertising dollars in the world can't buy back one bad bottle of beer. Don't you just hate it when you get a bad bottle of beer? I don't know. Apparently, beer can, but I mean, I will tell you, sometimes I've had a can of soda that I think's been around too long. It's kind of flat, all right? And so it must be true with beer. But I thought, for the world to take that stance that one bad bottle, they spend millions on advertising, right? When I watch the Patriots this afternoon, I'm going to see a lot of alcohol advertisements, okay? Okay, our last question. The 10 northern tribes rejected his reign. They chose Jeroboam to be their king instead of Rehoboam. This would divide Israel for the next 500 years. In fact, The 10 northern tribes, and this is where sometimes where it becomes confusing. The 10 northern tribes, now they are called Israel. Before, Israel was 12 tribes. Now, after Rehoboam and this revolt, and Jeroboam becomes king of northern tribes, they are now Israel. Rehoboam is now king of Judah. And Judah and Simeon and Benjamin, those two kind of, Simeon gets swallowed up by Judah eventually. So they're for the next 500 years. Israel in the north never has a godly king. Israel in the north, they don't heed God's warning. And they eventually are attacked by Assyria and carried off into captivity, and they never come back. Judah will eventually, in 600 BC, they will eventually be conquered by Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar. They'll get carried off to Babylon. They'll come back in 70 years, and that becomes Judah, or we sometimes call them Israel, but it's not the 10 northern tribes. So it divides them. We ought to abandon the ways of the world. Okay? The ways of the world, they want, to be tough and angry and, okay. We need to discern God's will by leaning on Him and let humility be our guide. Be humble. Be humble. Amen. Well, that's our lesson for this morning. I'll give next week's lesson to Robert here. God bless you.